In this video, I want to share my perspective on Pluto and Aquarius through the 12 houses. This is something I did earlier in the year on Star Sound Astrology, my friend Iryliana Samsara's YouTube channel, when Pluto first entered Capricorn. Right now, I want to reapproach this conversation since Pluto's about to enter Aquarius in just over a week. And I think this entry into Aquarius being the decisive new phase, a decisive beginning of this cycle, it is no longer in a transitional phase. It's really worth giving some new attention to. And I'm going to be focusing my analysis on one particular quality. And to introduce this quality, let's take a step back and contemplate the meaning of the Aquarius archetype in general. I think of all the signs, Aquarius might be one of the most misunderstood because we have a lot of interesting associations, but not commonly an understanding as to how they are all connected with each other. So Aquarius can correspond to groups, community, friends. It also corresponds to science and innovation and technology. It also corresponds to rebellion and liberation. And it also corresponds to shocks and surprises. So what is that all about? Let's take an example of any structural reality in our life. Literally anything. This can be your posture, right? This can be the social norms of any group of people, the church you go to, the spiritual communities or the groups that you associate with, your political affiliations. There are norms, there are habits. And all things that are norms, all things that are conditions, are habituated and developed in time. Like nothing that's conditioned in form becomes that way overnight. Every form, every structure, even a tree, grew into that gradually and slowly. And this is a Capricornian thing, that all structure is slowly and gradually defined in time and conditioned over time. And if you want to change the conditioning, you can begin to develop new habits. So if I have this posture, it's because of a repetition of habits. And if I want to change that posture, I have to consciously apply new thought, new intention, new effort to cultivate a new habit. All things Capricorn Saturn are essentially like that. Now, if my body, if my thoughts, if any quality of life can be conditioned, it means there's something original to it that is not by its nature conditioned. In other words, if it can be conditioned, by its nature, it's molded and available and fluid enough to take on that conditioning. From the point of view of the individuated soul on this journey from life to life, you can say who we are in our essence is not defined. We are not defined by the conditioning that we take on. Aquarius corresponds to the unconditioned self, that which is not conditioned. So my personality, my name, my memories, my stories, my projections, all of my group identities, that's what's known, that's what's defined, and that's a particular identification and structure that I'm inhabiting or playing out. But none of that defines me. Aquarius is our essential nature, our unconditioned self, and everything in life can be understood as beyond or before or prior to the names and the ideas and the constructs that we give it is what it is. So there's a poem that someone wrote, and I forgot who wrote it and I forgot how it went, but the poem more or less goes like this. And maybe you can post in the comments if you know this poem. A rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. And I'm probably not getting it right, but it's something like that. And what that says is you call it a rose and it's a rose, and we stop seeing it for what it is because the mind has already so many associations with it. So Aquarius, being unconditioned, says you look at life and we ask ourselves, what is it like without your story? What is it like to not have a lot of preconceptions? And I think what's hard, what's difficult relative to the state of freedom is we have a lot of investment in our known reality, in the known social structures and who people think we are, in the groups that we belong in. So let me begin to take apart all these different Aquarius dynamics that I mentioned and show you how they all work together. Let's say you're part of a political group. And I know this might not seem very relatable in this day and age, but just go along with me. And this political group fits your general, ideology. Maybe it's, for the most part, resonates with your social, political values. But you agree with something that someone said who is of a different political group or maybe unaffiliated. but the majority of people in your group feels really strongly about that particular view. And so you post something on social media and you get a lot of backlash. And what do? You stop talking about it. You realize that these ideas don't really fit into the perspective and the consensus of this group that you're associated with. And well, I don't want to be an outsider. I don't want to be kicked out, or I don't want to say the wrong thing or believe the wrong thing or stand for the wrong thing. So it creates this internal sense of alienation. That's where we have groups of people that will come together because they all resonate. They share something in common. So we form community. But what always happens within each community is there's always going to be the experience that each individual fundamentally will find is authentic and true for themselves, whether or not they're embracing that, where each person cannot in their fullness identify with the group. Because really the group is not defined by the sameness, it's defined by certain qualities or energetics resonating with each other. But the moment we suppress our whole unconditioned being and we try to fit into a fixed construct, we require a certain level of conformity. And so that creates a strong sense of inhibition. I'm afraid to liberate from the known and just be what I am because, well, that's going to mean I'm Republican or I'm Democratic or I, am on this social stance or I'm in this social stance. And our mainstream reality is always going to offer these binaries or these dualities where it paints everything in black and white. We're going to do this on the inside. Really, when we're liberating with Aquarius, we're liberating from our own internal dualities, right? Where we've simplified life and said this and this. And to every place that we are unconsciously creating these categories, right? These divisions, these oversimplifications of life, there's some element of us that's being suppressed, some element of our whole being, our individuality, that which we are when we're not trying to be something else, that's pushed away, which results in either suppression for the sake of belonging or not shaking up the status quo, or rebellion. I was with you guys, but you know what? I'm leaving and I'm going to do my own thing, or I'm going to join this group. And we'll often do that, go from one group of people or one ideology, one community that at some point we reach a sort of evolutionary edge or growth edge with them because all of ourself can't be accepted. And we want to try on the other parts of ourself that didn't have a voice there. So we'll go over there. And of course, that creates its own polarization, which I've spoken to before in my recent newsletter. That experimentation is really a part of the process of finding integration, where we realize I'm not either of those and no one is. And we become more true and authentic to our own nature. So there's a process that seems like we're innovating, like I have a thought, an idea that no one's had before, because I'm not trying to fit into a framework, but really these new ideas and thoughts are just what emerges, not so much when we see something new, but when we stop seeing something old. Right? What happens with Aquarius is sort of the self-evident, the self-emergent algorithm and intelligence of life becoming more evident. We're projecting less of our own story and connecting more with just the intelligence of creation. So it becomes more aligned with the cosmos. And that's why also Aquarius, speaking to technology, everything that we invent is sort of approaching the intelligent design of creation itself. And there's really no other intelligence than the intelligence of creation. There's only one singular, like, think about it, like, there's not like the intelligent design of all that is, and then there's something else. There's only that. And so we liberate our mind and we become more intelligent. We access higher intelligence because we're accessing more of the matrix of reality itself. And so we can see more clearly. We can understand human potential. We can understand what wants to emerge and what is potentiated within our human earth experience when we're not so defined by these limits of thinking. But doing that is, again, often a very scary process. And we know throughout history, many people have been hung, killed, persecuted, or just outright wrong or excommunicated from their group, from their community, from life, because they had radical ideas that, a few hundred century years later were recognized as totally valid and true. But do not be mistaken. To this day and age, many people that have thoughts that are just different than the mainstream are treated in the same way. And there's a tendency for human consciousness relative to the Saturn-Capricorn dimension to want to belong, to want continuity and consistency and stability. And so to defend and protect the known parameters and push away anything that counters that. Even in the scientific community, and I won't go down this rabbit hole, but I will later, some other day. There are these scientific theories that we've all learned that we know aren't true, but there's so much has been invested in these theories that it's almost like a cognitive dissonance. It's hard to take in new information and question what's already been established as known. It takes a growing and collective momentum of enough people who are thinking differently for that to actually kind of tip over into a little more of a consensus for changes to actually begin to happen. That's true with all things. So while Aquarius corresponds to just the nature of creation, the intelligent design, the algorithm, it also speaks to the future and innovation just because we're always suppressing that intelligence. So as we evolve, it's always going to feel like there's something new and innovative, but really it's just a freedom from the known. The association of shocks and surprises comes from the same place. We're all living in a conditioned reality. So we have our story and our projection of who I am, what I'm doing, what my life is. This is our relationship, or this is this political party, or what I'm doing. This is my job. And these things are true kind of on a relative level in terms of on paper, the roles or the agreements that we're making. But it's not true on the essential level. And then when these relative levels sort of get so big and so important, we miss out on the actual story unfolding. So things happen that seem totally out of the blue. People behave in certain ways or events occur. It seems to disrupt where we thought our life was going. Very often these shocks and surprises are a way in which the natural destiny of life, the unfolding of the algorithm, is just moving where it's meant to. It's completely impersonal, but that can be traumatizing or confusing or shocking relative to our existing conditioning. So, this is Aquarius. At the core, when we look at Pluto in Aquarius, the evolutionary intention is one to eliminate these dynamics of suppression, and thus it sort of purges and brings up to the surface where different groups of people or our affiliation groups of people might become a point of alienation and stress and contention. And this issue with, do I belong? Do you belong? Am I a part of this? And where groups of people might be holding onto power. I need to be this, and I reject you. You can't be a part of this. Or I need to move with this group that is very exclusively into only the things that I'm into so I can protect my identity. Or I need to completely free myself from being put into any kind of box at all and rebel from all of it. These are the dynamics that come up with Pluto and Aquarius. And I think it really highlights where our unconditioned self gets fixed into a projection of a story for the sake of belonging. Pluto in Aquarius, on the highest level, wants to eliminate those emotional dependencies. So then the evolutionary intention is to be what you are, whatever that means. We have to be willing to embrace change, which for a time, and only for a time, might mean for some of us, others don't understand us. It might mean for a time we feel alone, or we don't know who our friends are, or we deal with the experience of not being a part of something. But these things aren't true. And in fact, one of the deeper teachings of Pluto and Aquarius is we all belong together. It's only the desires of the soul, our fixation, our attachments to certain identities that keep us from that recognition. Right? Like I saw a meme on Facebook, which is how wonderful it is for two people who disagree with each other to still be friends. Sounds nice. And actually, in this day and age, it's kind of surprising how infrequent that actually is. Of course, it happens all the time, but we're seeing a lot of not that. People canceling friends and family members because they support something that they strongly disagree with, right? Suppressing the voice of other people who have a dissonant or alternative view on something. I can't hear that, or that's not okay, or that's dangerous, that's wrong, that's bad. And so we demonize people, we push them out. And what do when you feel like you can't be yourself or can't think what you think? Do you just shut up and belong? Well, you might, but that inner voice doesn't go anywhere, right? It stays inside. or you just feel completely disconnected and alienated and hurt. And these are the issues that need to emerge so we can move towards unity. That's the point. I mean, Pluto and Aquarius want to bring up these polarizations, this us versus them stuff. Your group, my group. And I spoke a lot about this, and I shared in an earlier video, one of the main issues with any kind of us-them psychology, the second someone becomes another, even if it's an entire political group, right? The second they become another, we no longer want to understand them. We no longer see their humanity. It's like this two-dimensional, I already understand what's going on. I got the answers for you. And there's no space for understanding or intimacy or connection. The beauty of Aquarius is not like we have to agree or understand the same things or, like the same food or have the same politics. It's a deeper level, which is we're all here. And the analogy is we're all children in a school, right? And when the bell rings, we're all going to get in line for recess. Like we're all here together. So the elimination of these attachments and working through all of these core karmic dynamics. This is what's happening collectively. Right? I don't need to speak to the political reality for us to understand that. That's just what's happening. On a personal level, it speaks to what is it like for you to be who you are. Now, in general, and this is a useful Jeff Green teaching on Aquarius, this impulse for liberation is responded to in generally one of three ways. One, total suppression, as I've spoken to. Two, slight innovation and change, but not too radical because we don't want to shake up our security too much. So it's like looking around, what can I manage? What can I emotionally integrate? What's safe? But I don't want to traumatize myself or be an outsider. Imagine being a part of a church with a particular ideology and, you ask questions or you look for the people in the lineage that have more alternative views and you find a way to fit it into the box, but you're not breaking free entirely. And then third is breaking free entirely. And that can be understood on many levels of consciousness, right? That can come with a sort of paranoid, I'm done with you, I want to be my own person. Or it can come with a sort of liberated mindset of realizing none of this is who I am. That everyone's walking around in a matrix of projection and thought, believing their thoughts and thinking, you believe that, I believe that, oh, here, we're community. And we look at history. We look at all the things that humanity has done, all the different movements and groups. There's power in numbers. There's power in groups. And there's always going to be the outliers of the few people that step outside of that. And that's that third group of Aquarius. For us personally on our own soul journey, the question becomes, what does it look like to commit to the freedom of our own being, not the future freedom, not the freedom through something, not becoming something or doing something new to become free, but the truth of our innate freedom, that we are unconditioned. What does it look like? What does it look like to actually be what you are and to have no context for where that belongs? You can be a particular professional and suddenly you realize, I don't know how to fit into this anymore. You can be following a religion or a spiritual practice and not understand who you are relative to that anymore. This can show up in a relationship. This can show up in terms of your sense of life direction and life purpose. It's powerful. It's permeating. And throughout this entire journey, all of these years that Pluto will be in Aquarius, we're going to look towards those key aspects when Pluto is being activated by the outer planets, when Pluto comes into strong relationship to the nodes. These are the times where these core evolutionary themes are most pronounced. And it's very pronounced right now. Pluto in Aquarius opposite Mars in Leo, and I'll be speaking a lot more to Leo through the signs. We're going to have several months of this opposition being very active. Mars in Leo ask us to have courage. Don't be afraid to stand out. Don't be afraid to be who you are and have confidence in yourself, even if you have no clue what it actually is. So one more thought I'll share regarding Pluto in Aquarius. We tend to hold the idea of our unconditioned self as like far out in the future, like a thing that I'll become later. But the amazing thing with Aquarius is it's right now. And that's why we can have these shocking events or surprises where it feels like suddenly I don't know where I'm going, or I don't belong, or the structural status quo of my life is no longer operative, or I don't have the same community. All of these things are wanting to point us to who we actually already are. But it might be hard for us to understand that if we're so identified with these ideas of who we want to be. Sometimes life is actually just pushing us to actualize and step more into our unique soul vibration. Now, let me just share the transit. So this is the day on November 19th here in the US that Pluto enters Aquarius. We got Mars opposite it, but just take a look at this. We have Neptune entering Aries, Uranus entering Gemini, and ultimately we're going to have, in just a little over a year, Jupiter entering Leo. So check this out. This is really amazing. In July 19th, 2026, we have 4 degrees Pluto, Aquarius, 4 Aries, Neptune, 4 Gemini, Uranus, 4 Leo. And you just kind of move this back some hours, you're going to have the moon up there too. Basically approaching a perfect Star of David. We just need something in Sagittarius, but involving all of the outer planets. It's pretty profound. Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter's there. Saturn isn't directly there. Chiron isn't. It's just a really profound energetic. It's really activating. Really, really activating. I think the remaining years of this decade are just radical and profound. With all of that said, let's now jump into Pluto in Aquarius through the 12 houses. My focus here is going to zero in on this quality of liberation from the unknown, being on the edge of insecurity, the fear of embracing our own unconditioned self, what it looks like to hold on to our conditioning, fear of letting go, and what it might look like in an archetypal sense to liberate. And remember, this is the general theme over these next, however many years, Pluto will be in Aquarius. Before I jump in, my planets that square the lunar nodes class series has just begun. We met last week for our first class on Pluto, and this week will be on Mars. So you can enroll in the entire series or just enroll in individual classes. More on that in the description below. And as always, I'm available for one-on-one sessions, for couples, individuals, and long-term soul-to-soul companionship sessions. And if you'd like to receive the articles that I often write with these videos, you can also subscribe for that. All right, let's get started. Pluto in Aquarius in the first house. This is liberating from the precedent of what you've known your freedom to be. Sometimes we think freedom is being really strong, or running really fast, or having a fast motorcycle, or, not being bothered by anyone else. Sometimes with Aquarius, we'll tend to metaphorically deflect the true freedom of our being onto known qualities because it sort of represents something that symbolizes what is actually true on the inside. But and that's why you'll have like Aquarius in the first house. There might be a draw towards extremity, right? Going to extreme sports or extreme experience, like jumping off of airplanes. What's the intention? Like, what's really going on with all of that? The desire is to experience the very edge of the unknown, living in the present moment where I'm free to make decisions right now that are in resonance with my unique soul vibration. This means I'm going to go somewhere and do something that I've never considered before. It seems out of the blue, out of context, but simply it's not conditioned by the known past. This does require a certain level of courage and self-trust and self-leadership on a soul level to be able to make changes so quickly and so suddenly. The issue is if we're repressing, we might find ourselves becoming very numb and dull, like a lack of energy, right? Or we'll become very rebellious and feel defensive to anything that's trying to suppress our own freedom. Those are two sides of the same coin here. The key is to recognize the path and the walk that we're walking on this life is a reflection and is one with our own awakening. Our true self and the path in awakening to our true self are one. We have to allow it to lead us. So pay attention to the signals, to the synchronicities, to the signs that are guiding you along this journey. And don't be afraid to make seemingly out of the blue choices. And if you don't, if you're suppressing that, that's where things get a little more intense or dramatic in our life because it's pushing up against a part of ourselves that we're trying to hold on to the known. Pluto and Aquarius in the second house. From a conditioned point of view, we make money, we live the way that we live. There are certain ideas around survival or, living in a house and being a part of it. The thing is, most of our ideas of living are defined by these very exclusive, isolative qualities of me and mine and you and yours. I always say it's weird that I walk on a street and I might have to use the bathroom, but I'm passing probably 100 bathrooms, combined in all the houses that I'm walking by, but I can't use any one of them because I don't know who lives there. Now, I could just knock on any door and say, hey, can I use your bathroom? But that would be weird, right? Sharing resources, that would be really weird. We don't really do that in this day and age in most places in the world. And that's a part of the limitations of Aquarius in the second house. We're taking the immense abundance and potential for human experience and how we can live and thrive, and we're suppressing it because it's me and my community, or me and my nuclear family, me and mine and you and yours. So on one level, we're liberating and we're getting out of the box of these limiting old ways of thinking around survival. On another level, this can simply be when I am myself, I can see life and humanity itself as an open template for thriving. I just need to be willing to think in a more inclusive and open-minded way. Maybe there are things to do or skills or gifts that I have that I can share that will bring benefit to other people and then bring me what I need as well. If we're trying to fit into the basic socio-economic social box of how we live and how we relate to resources and how we are supposed to make money, we might feel very dry and stagnant, and again, a sort of loss of life and joy and pleasure. There can be a dissociation from the body as a result of that. This is liberating the senses, to be free to receive and experience the life force of this moment. And that freedom only happens when we're not slaving ourselves to something that suppresses our nature. I think we could have, no possessions, no money, and actually feel a lot more free than someone who has seemingly a lot of wealth, if that freedom means we're not trying to be something that we're not. Because in the moment and in our freedom, there is so much going on here. Every breath, every moment itself offers its own pathway towards abundance and possibility. And it's helpful to remember that the core of Aquarius, when we're unconditioned, naturally, is about inclusion and sharing. It's inclusivity. That's the nature of Aquarius. In a golden age, a long time ago, which most people will say was like primitive age, it's actually a more evolved age. Our personal survival was linked to being a part of community and being accountable to community, to be accountable towards each other. And that quality of inclusion and togetherness is innate. And when we have that ingrained in our own hearts, it's really hard to feel a sense of deprivation, because there's a sort of friendliness and trust in life that comes in that state of freedom. Something to think about. Pluto in Aquarius in the third house. Like I was saying, a rose is a rose is a rose. So you look at something, you give it a name, and you define it. And suddenly that's your reality. Or you read something on Facebook and you don't question it, and that becomes a fact. And we can be living this life with a whole bunch of accumulated facts and ideas that form a matrix of beliefs. But is it necessarily true? Very often, simply the thoughts that we're thinking are just repeated ideas that are kind of circulating in our mind over and over and over again, that other people are saying, that other people think you should say. It's like group thinking. So again, relative to different political ideologies or beliefs, there's like the thing that you're supposed to say. There are the questions that you're allowed to ask. I have Uranus in the third house. When I was at yeshiva university, my first year of college, I was really questioning a lot of my Judaism and Torah, and I would ask all these questions about Judaic law, questions that couldn't get answered, and they were out of the framework of what other people were asking. Because most people ask questions that by their very nature assume the premise of the thing they're asking about, but my questions were questioning the premise. So for example, if you believe that the rabbis have authority, and that the words of the Torah are true and the rabbinical teachings of the Talmud are also binding, then you're going to ask questions not relative to, is this true? You're going to ask questions that sort of relate to understanding and making it work so that you can live it. But if you free your mind from this preconceived idea that what they're saying has to be true, then the questions become, how do we know that what they're saying is true? Why is that true? Or, how do you apply that in this case? What's the reason for the Torah being written by God? Like, what's the proof? So we're looking for actual logic. And there's a certain point where consensus thinking and our own consensus conditioned thinking, the logic ends. Like, truly, it's a fascinating thing to realize. relative to the sort of trends of our beliefs and our ideas, there's a certain point where we are no longer thinking logically or sanely. We're just sort of accepting certain premises as true, and all future logic is based on those accepted premises, but those premises will never be questioned. We learned, probably growing up, I learned this, you probably did too, that the reason for the precession of the equinox is because there's a wobble of the earth, and that wobble is caused by the solely lunar theory. There's like this gravitational pull and all that kind of stuff. We know that's not true. It's been disproven, and there are some really good alternative theories out there. But the point that I want to make is that's still taught and believed in the scientific community, and the evidence of facts is usually not enough for us to actually change our thinking. Because the evidence of facts, if there's not a willingness to liberate our mind and actually see something new, even with fact, we are not going to see something new. It's fascinating. The human mind is so powerful that factual evidence has no weight, no bearing. At a certain point, enough people begin to hear an idea or think an idea or share an idea that it becomes no longer a fringe thought and it becomes more consensus. And so the mainstream gradually picks up on it. But this is the point with Pluto and Aquarius in the third house. Free your mind and the rest will follow. Liberate your thinking. Be willing to question the premise, the ideas. Don't accept any definition unless you can actually understand why it's true and why it works. Fourth house. So, we all came from a family of some kind. And in this day and age, family tends to look a certain way. Again, it can be this nuclear family situation where it's some form of mother or father, family, maybe siblings in a community, and you have your soccer games and your school and the time you wake up and the food you eat and the smell and where you go for the holidays. And then you have the dysfunctions, like the arguments that you witness when you're a child and the different tensions between mother and father and the discomfort, the uncomfortable Christmas or family dinners or Passover seders. There's a way in which family and the conditional dynamics of our family experience shapes our sense of identity and what is normal. So we grow up, and then as an emotional being, as a human being that needs to be able to feel safe and nurtured, we repeat these patterns. Sometimes we repeat dysfunctional patterns, but they're simply known. Dysfunctional becomes a symbol of home because it's what we grew up with, it's what we know. When we look at Aquarius in the fourth house, we're freeing up the emotional body. And the emotional body has its own intelligence, and actually it's how we integrate all of our experience. We're human beings here on this journey. We're manifesting in a human experience. And so emotions that are sort of distorted or suppressed or repressed because we've learned that growing up, this wants to open it up and free it. In the process, we realize, wow, there are certain conditioned trauma behaviors that I'm very familiar with. Like, this is what it looks like for me to have a family or have a home or live here as a human being. There are certain patterns that I've developed that just kind of go along with it. And then when someone's crying, I can't hear it. It's like I can't deal with strong emotions. Or maybe these strong emotions arise in me and I'm overwhelmed by them. They overtake me. What we're learning how to do is to allow the emotional process to actually do what it does. Like, emotions being a form of intelligence, they fit into the larger intelligent design of creation itself. And if we allow for a completeness of experience, it will heal us, it will inform us. Like, there's a mystery and a technology actually to emotion. But I think we get so stuck on our subjective ideas that our thoughts get in the way of ourselves and other people's emotions. So the freedom and the liberation of the emotional body here also means we don't have to limit our idea of family to just the people that we grew up with or any conditioned ideas. It's anyone that shares a vibrational resonance that can actually be there as a human being. From an Aquarius point of view, when we put this in the fourth house, it's very interesting to consider that we are all on the same level. Like mother, brother, father, sister, son, uncle, like all these different familial relationships, while on a Saturn level, these are different forms and structures. On a soul level, we're all the same. We're all friends, right? And in a future lifetime, I can be a mother or a father or the son. these arrangements, or a friend, can shift and go into all kinds of expressions, and they do. So we look beyond the conditioned form of our familiarities, and we recognize underneath it all, we're all just these soul individualities awakening, playing out these particular forms. So we kind of loosen the strong hold of well, this is who I'm supposed to be, and this is who you're supposed to be. And we recognize there's a shared intelligence of present and caring and holding and being with that can help us free ourselves up. And again, in terms of how we often limit the full intelligent scope of this human experience, Aquarius in the fourth wants to teach us that we can thrive and be so much more healthy if we free up the waters. And of course, the fourth house speaks to the feminine in general, and just the archetype of that which holds and contains and nurtures. So allowing that to be what it is without so much conditioning or suppression. It could also mean reconnecting with other people. And we're always going to find ourselves connecting with, groups of people who are sort of working up the same point of liberation. So there might be like a very particular kind of community, like something that holds you and nurtures you. That can be very much, I found my people, or something very healing that's supportive, and it's not in the same box of what I'm familiar with or used to. On a personal level, the core of it is being able to nurture and care for that tender part of us that we all got to come into full expression and have its own freedom to be integrated in our human experience. Pluto in Aquarius in the fifth house. I think this is very emphasized right now, in particular with the Mars in Leo opposition. You are not defined by the performance you just put on, by the album that you just produced, by the YouTube video that you last created, by the thing that you did that got you many likes or got you to run viral. You can be loved. You can be hated. People can adore you. People can despise you. Pluto in Aquarius in the fifth house says, don't worry about that. Whether you receive praises or whether you receive insults, be yourself and have the courage to share your own individual expressions. This is freeing up your creativity. What kind of artist are you? I am my soul. I am my nature. I am the individuality of my own being, and it's meant to be exactly what it's meant to be. Freeing that up and allowing it to come through in whatever way it wants to come through. For some souls, this actually might look like there's some purpose that I'm meant to express and actually share. But more intimately, it says, what is it like to find my joy and my confidence in life in just being what I am? To not hold myself in the precedent of, oh, this is what I look like. This is how I dress in public. I don't want people to think I'm weird. I don't want to be too out of the box. Be out of the box. There's no box. There's never a box. The box never existed. Be yourself. We have a bunch of people, like the emperor with no clothes, thinking that they're fitting into some kind of paradigm, but it's actually the shared agreement that very few people actually question. What is it like to sing in public? Not because you're trying to get all the attention or put on a show, but because you want to sing. You're alive. You're connected to that solar life force of energy running through you freely. And it's your nature to be a creative being, the higher intelligence of your creative essence. I think in ancient times, I'll refer to this probably several times in this video, we look at the various technologies and the spiritual knowledge that people had of mathematics, of the stars, of astronomy, and geometry. And we also know that song and art was an integral part of these ancient civilizations. I think more so than like the written literal word. It's more vibrational, moving our whole being into a creative expression. And that's why it's not about, I'm going to dress up with the feathers and make myself look a certain way. It's actually understanding that we are these vibratory beings that are connecting with this larger cosmic energy, and it's through creativity, through our creative liberation that brings us into resonance with our essential vibration and the higher intelligence of creation itself. We just have to be willing to do that. It might look for some like a particular specific form of creativity, maybe seemingly inventing or coming up with new ideas, right? But the core of it is the freedom to just be what we are and live, to be entitled to exist as a vibrational being, no matter what that looks like. Pluto in Aquarius in the sixth house. So a part of what we're liberating here can be our addictions and our obsessions with old forms of control and order. The sixth house can often have a quality of slavery or servitude, like just doing busy work that actually takes our soul away from ourselves. Just, it can be our meditation practice. It can be cleaning up the house. But the details themselves can lose meaning. It can be a matter of a sort of route going through the motions, but we have to suppress a lot of our own individuality. We're liberating on the one hand from a sort of slave-like mundanity going through the motions, and that could be in our work, in our job, if you're a professional or doing some kind of vocational job as an astrologer or massage therapist. Like, you read a chart, you follow the list, step 1, step 2, step 3, and we lose a connection to it actually being medicine, right? You just follow the routine and the order, and it's just very suppressive. So when we're not looking at the floor, at the kitchen, at the body, at the astrology chart from a conditioned lens, what is it? And how can we use it in a healing way? Doing a healing technique where the healing technique actually serves that which the technique was made for, as opposed to just doing the technique, right? We're getting our mind out of the trance of technique. So the key is to kind of hold that bird's eye view and not allow the list or the steps or the different details to become too overwhelming. Because then you look at a natal chart and you get stuck with all of the aspects and all of the ideas. To kind of take a step back and allow the whole picture to reveal itself as a holistic, unified intelligence. On a more mundane level, we can think of our kitchen and cleaning it up. We have the pathways that we're familiar with, and there are so many other ways of organizing things. Put this there, get a different kind of dish rack, or maybe you can hang the dishes on a rack instead of putting them back in the sink. It's the ability to think more broadly, where we're not defined by the technique, but we're holding the larger view, and so we can see new possibilities that frees up our energy and connects us with our higher intelligence. One more thought on the signature, focusing a bit more on the Pluto dimension. Remembering that Pluto corresponds to perception. So let's imagine we're diagnosing a disease, or there's something going on with someone's body, someone's health. And so we're, looking at all of the pieces and putting it together to understand what's the issue so that we can know how to fix the issue. In many ways, the sixth house corresponds to all of the ways in which we improve upon all the various conditions of our life that need constant maintenance. But we're going to perceive the problem according to our level of consciousness. And the problem that we perceive then hooks us into a whole paradigm of dealing with what we will then do in order to fix the problem that we perceive. Like, we're existing on a whole paradigm of reality wherein exists the medicines, the techniques, the perspectives that all operate on the level of what we think the problem is. As we develop more of a bird's eye view, all of the problems of our life are seen from a higher level of consciousness. There's more intelligence, there's more of an observer mind. Thus, we get less focus on the symptoms, on the external diagnostic elements of something. And so we get less entangled in the knit and grit. And really, there's a lot less control. The more we perceive the holistic reality, sort of really on a deeper level, Aquarius in the sixth house is sort of liberating from the body. It's liberating from all of the details, and it's getting into the underlying intelligence that is at the core, the root of the various dynamics that we experience on a physical level. But we have to have that higher intelligence in order to see that. So, for example, I'm just going to pick some random, you're sniffly and you have a cold, right? So you can go and take cold medicine based on a certain level of perception. I have a cold, I'm sniffly, this medicine will help that. Of course, that medicine has its own side effects, and it's just dealing with the symptoms. So because of our level of perception, we're kind of getting ourselves stuck at a particular paradigm of cause and effect, right? Where we're dealing with the problems that we perceive and existing within that realm of diagnosis and solutions. But if we take a step back, we can see the manifestation of a cold as a part of a much larger organism. The more we hold a bird's eye view, we're going to see the whole system. It's like climbing the mountain and not just seeing this one issue, but seeing how that one issue interconnects with all of it. That the nasal congestion system and the digestive system and really the psychological system, they're all one unit. They're all interconnected in this one unified holistic organism. So from that more broader bird's eye view, our perception is actually a little more to the point. So we become less entangled with the details that might keep us endlessly stuck in diagnosis and treating symptoms, but not really healing. So there can be a liberation and elevation beyond the knit and grit, always dealing with problems and their solutions based upon a deeper level of perception where we're able to see the dimensions of our reality and the things that need improvement and fixing from a much larger bird's eye view. This means we're also getting to the core of what is healing truly, right? What does it mean to really heal? How do we really bring about healing or improvement relative to the conditions that need healing? And it's really about liberating our mind from the perceptions that will keep us sick or will keep us busy, that will keep us, in a continual state of management, and really grabbing the larger picture and freeing up our mind. So there can be this, renaissance of health and clarity and insight because we're actually beginning to see the body and the various components of our life that need maintenance from a much broader, higher level of consciousness. Pluto in Aquarius in the 7th house. Well, let's give the example of someone that doesn't want to share their feelings. I kind of like what that Republican candidate said, or I kind of like what that independent candidate said. Oh, I can't say that because that doesn't fit into the mainstream box. Or you can be on the other side of that. You have that view that makes you a conservative. I can't hear that. We can either find ourselves afraid of accepting other people's feelings, their unique nature, thus not hearing them, or we can find ourselves in the situation where we're afraid to be ourselves because we don't want to be rejected. So the freedom and liberation with Aquarius and Pluto in the 7th is actually freeing up our ability to listen. Who are you actually? And the thing that we have to pay attention to is the listening becomes two-dimensional once we've decided, oh, I get it. You're in this box, or this is your type, or this is your person. What's interesting is astrology and Aquarius is archetypal, right? So you can easily put people in archetypes, but those archetypes become limited and two-dimensional when they're no longer breathing reflections of the soul's inner reality, but instead become descriptives. Oh yeah, well, I'm the 3 on the Enneagram. I'm the this in my human design, and my moon is this in astrology, and that's why I'm these ways. There's no humanity there. There's no living, breathing soul animation underneath those descriptions. And so we want to resist the temptation on the basis of security, because we want security and belonging, to either put ourselves or other people in boxes that strips away the possibility of true intimacy. And that can be scary. That can actually mean, if I'm hearing you for what you are, I can't understand or place our relationship or how I'm supposed to be with you into a box or into a framework of what's known. And that's great. That's totally fine, because the beauty and the liberation that comes from that is you never needed to in the first place. We have all of our projections and our conditioning and our ideas of who we are and what relationship is and should be, and then we have what is. And we can have that Aquarian experience of someone is just so different and we just don't get it. We can't understand them, or maybe someone just can't understand us. Can we still hold that inclusivity mindset where we're actually open to including them in their whole being? Like, you're still a part of this human game. It doesn't matter if you have these different needs or preferences. And what's beautiful is it creates a thriving ecosystem. When we learn to ground and respect the truth of our unity and our togetherness, even if there are these differences, it actually creates an adaptability and availability to meet more needs and thus create more of a vibrant sort of ecosystem and reality that we wouldn't have created if those needs weren't already there. For example, if you have a need to, eat a certain kind of diet, and I have a very different kind of dietary need, and we live together, that creates a more diverse, inclusive state in the kitchen where more creative possibilities emerge. Now you bring in a few other people who have unique and different realities on all different kinds of levels. If we're in an inclusive mindset, it doesn't become limiting. it becomes, then there are more opportunities, more adjustments, more ways of nurturing the zillion pathways of relationship and how different people can meet some needs, some people can't meet other needs, to allow for even a more diverse ecosystem of inclusivity and acceptance. We thrive in our differentness. It brings more to more of us if we embrace it with an open heart. But the opposite is true if we're afraid of it and we're suppressing that. So learn to listen to yourself and to other people with an authentic sense of, what is it like to validate your unique reality according to your nature and your experience, and to want you to be you and only that. It's just a beautiful way to think, a beautiful way to be with all people. Pluto in Aquarius in the 8th house. This is liberation from the subconscious memory of betrayal, abandonment, loss, and entanglement. What we learn with Aquarius in the 8th is that the soul is essentially free. But our fixations and our attachments, our unresolved desires to get something from them, or to belong, or I need you to love me and want me, all of these different elements come in, and we have the memory and then the ongoing experience of betrayal, of abandonment, of loss, or even being hung or burned at the stake and betrayed by people that we otherwise gave our trust to. So on the one hand, there can be this repetition of being available to give and trust, because that 8th house is about sharing and intimacy, and the Aquarian energy can also be friendliness. So here I am, the sharing, this giving quality, and then a lot of hurt and betrayal, which then can easily lead to a sense of distrust or jadedness. And we can also have on the other end, because of that hurt and betrayal, a resistance to trusting other people. And a lot of this is linked to these deeper subconscious memories that want to kind of come up and heal at this time. So this is about developing a psychological lens of perspective. It's like looking at a natal chart and being able to pinpoint the deeper psychological dynamics of the soul, but we're seeing it as an observer. So we're not taking it personally. And when we can see something from an observer point of view, a person's actions can't actually hurt us. And almost as if the actions and what felt like a real human drama gets further and further away from us, and we realize here we are just watching, and nothing actually affects us. So then the other end of it is like this. We can consciously enter into very conscious relationships, intimate, sexual, business relationships, where there's a shared mutual intent for deeper soul growth. And it's unlocking the intelligence of Kundalini, the intelligence of working with bonding, with desire, with joining forces in a way that it leads towards a deeper transmutation and evolution of energy. This is a very powerful potential. I think a lot of souls with this signature will really begin to uncover this powerful life force and be forming relationships with others in a way that serves that. But prior to that phase, I think a lot of the relationships become, in its highest interpretation, triggers to bring up where we are not free. Right? That which is suppressing our Kundalini, that which is suppressing our life force, and actually wants to help us to recognize exactly where these deeper betrayals, fears, abandonments want to be liberated. So the key with Pluto and Aquarius in the 8th house is liberating from our attachments. And you don't liberate from your attachments while being attached at the same time. So the attachments have to be completely seen. And once the attachments are seen, we can have clear perception. It's like what's said in the Tao Te Ching. Bound by desire, you can only see the manifestations. Free of desire, you can see the source. And there's a great ability to deepen our perception and our memory, our knowledge, and our perception of the deeper psychological undercurrent underlying our current life experiences here. And I think many souls with this signature will find themselves drawn towards things like astrology and just deeper forms of psychology that will further support that cultivation of objective perception of these deeper dimensions. Pluto in Aquarius in the 9th house. This brings us back to the idea of there's a great difference between believing in something versus actually knowing something. So I mentioned I have Uranus in the 3rd, but it's also in Sagittarius. So coming back to when I was at Yeshiva University, I had this whole experience of looking through the Talmud, looking through the Torah, really wanting to know what was true. And from a 9th house Sagittarian point of view, my underlying desire was to understand the meaning of life. So I wanted to know, what's the meaning of life? What's true? And thus, who am I and who am I supposed to be? These are all ninth house, broader philosophical questions, okay? I got to a point where I wasn't able to conclude anything. And I had this deep realization. I didn't quite frame it this way, and I learned this statement from Jeff Green many years later, but I think this is exactly what I realized, which is basically I got to this edge of recognition. If I wanted to walk a certain path, I would have to believe in that path. But I can't make myself believe something if I don't know it's true. And I don't know what's true. I need to experience it and find out. That was the realization in essence. The quote was, what you know, you don't need to believe because you already know it. And thus what's inferred is if you believe something, you don't know it. So a belief system literally means you don't know it. But what you know, and it's actually completely irrefutable. And what you know, you don't need to prove because it's nothing to prove. You just know it. It's like the taste of orange juice, or again, that taste of the ocean being salty. There's that Buddhist teaching, like the ocean is salty, the truth tastes like freedom. When you know it, because truth is a thing. It's there. It's real. It's actually what's going on here. So there's the experience of truth, which is the undeniable experience of reality as it is, and it requires nothing more to be added to it. So we're liberating from our beliefs, the matrix and the projection of cosmologies and philosophies and ideas that we don't actually know. That really pushes up against group belonging. This can correspond to, again, our political groups, our friends, our churches, our religious, our spiritual communities. It's very rare for someone to actually take a step back and ask the question, is it true? Well, how do I know it's true? Something that's true must be in the realm of my experience. Like if I'm in the water, then it must be true that I'm wet. And so we take a principle of truth. We start there. If this is true, and then we add the logic to the more empirical levels that must follow. That's how the ninth house archetype works. It works with the principle first, and then it works out the principle in its expressions and manifestations. It's the opposite of the third house Gemini archetype. So if this is true, then this must be true about me. This must be true about this moment. If this is my nature, and we want to work this out personally and directly for ourselves. So if we have a spiritual cosmology or practice, it doesn't mean we chuck it. It doesn't mean we're going to be, without any ground beneath our spiritual cosmology or feet. It means committing ourselves to penetrate, to get to the bottom line of the truth. Don't just try to be agreeable with your teacher or with your community or with what's known. Actually commit yourself to authentic and direct realization. And this also corresponds to, if you're a student, it's very easy to accept an idea or a teaching as true, but to not necessarily know that it's true. So there's a great difference between repeating an idea of someone else's realization versus something that's actually understood. And if you're a teacher, the challenge as a teacher is to not repeat a realization from 5 minutes ago, but to keep it authentic, so that we're freeing ourselves from ideas which become these crystallized religions, and we're actually keeping it real in the realm of authentic, direct experience. Pluto in Aquarius in the 10th house. Let's talk now dead on about politics, because politics corresponds to literally the 10th house. 10th house is country, nation, politics, people in office, things like that. I'm going to share my particular view on this by giving one particular example that I feel is very illuminating. So the Democratic Party here in the United States has had a very strong orientation to, wanting to get their person to win. They suppressed Bernie Sanders, rallied up against him. Both elections made sure Joe Biden won the primaries, even though Bernie was winning originally. And then this past year, they didn't have any debates to challenge the incumbent, right? So Joe Biden was the nominee, and they suppressed all debates. So Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr., they suppressed media attention. Media corporation, 10th house, worked with the mainstream Democratic Party to go along with that, right? And then once RFK Jr. became an independent, and he was getting double-digit polling, they still suppressed, along with the Republican Party, another mainstream 10th house group, they suppressed allowing him on stage. They didn't let him come to the debates, and made up some completely new rules, 10th house, new rules, relative to the interest of these core main political parties. So you see where I'm going. Aquarius 10th house is liberating from these mainstream duopolies, or these mainstream, this is the consensus way to be and how things are. In a sense, there's sort of an agreed upon, yeah, I don't like the way it is, but this is how it is. So I'll continue. Once Joe Biden stepped down, the Democratic Party didn't have any debate and no elections to vote a new Democratic nominee. Rather, they just appointed Kamala Harris. So I think the Democratic Party was unaware of how disenfranchised they were making more and more otherwise Democratic followers. They decided what the standards should be and basically said, if you don't agree with that, then you're not important. And this is the same thing. It's like these ethics and moralities we see all over social media and anywhere where communities coming together. That can be Aquarius in any of these houses. Your stance on different topics, from COVID to vaccines to Israel and Gaza to the border to all different sort of hot topics in the world. Many mainstream political groups would say, oh, if you don't agree with that, that's not okay. They would suppress you. So you have government, and we know that was happening, and it's not just Democratic or Republican, it's just the whole mainstream system that basically says, this is what the boxes are. So you get the point that I'm illustrating right now, okay? It's fascinating to watch because more and more the mainstream with Aquarius in the 10th house is going to feel more and more polarized from what actually wants to emerge. Within us, we have the consensus reality, that which fits into the box, right? Our own internal Republican, Democrat, I am this, I am that, right? But when we liberate from that, we realize, well, I'm not this, I'm not that. I don't really fit into any of these things. Well, that's scary because I'm going to be judged, 10th house. I'm going to be told I'm unethical for believing in those views or following this person. And so that can be very scary relative to that Capricorn 10th house need to belong, to be a good citizen. What's a good citizen? A good citizen is the citizen that follows the rules that someone else has said you should follow and that everyone else agrees with. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what makes you a good person, right? And so there's this fear of, I don't want to be kicked out. But you know what? There are examples throughout history of people doing the right thing and joining the groups. And, for example, the Nazi Party and many, many more examples. Have you heard of the Inquisition? There are examples all over history of masses of people joining consensus thinking. And actually, if you didn't, you might be out of the box. You might be in a dangerous situation. You would be persecuted. And this comes up at every level of society, always. And I think one of the biggest traumas that are emerging right now is that of judgment. And I would really hope, if you have Pluto and Aquarius in the 10th house, check your judgments. On one level, this is the purging of judgments, the purging of these absolute moralities that says you're right, you're wrong, because then we create these divisions and we actually say, if you are this, that means you're wrong, which means you are bad, right? We actually can demonize people. That's how in the 10th house, we can sort of walk that line of, there are consequences to our actions and moralities and group agreements. But then we cross that line into, oh, you're a bad person now. You voted for this person or you believe in this thing. You're a bad person now. And that can create a lot of shame. And we see a lot of that happening within families, within communities, a lot of shaming, a lot of distancing people from each other. So it's liberating from judgment. Now, on a personal level, you can say, I have this job where I wake up every day at 5 a.m. and I do this thing and I make my breakfast and I get my kids dressed. There could be a monotony and a boringness to just kind of doing the same thing every day. That's like putting yourself into a very known box. And that Aquarius is, there's something more here. There's something that wants to emerge, but you haven't seen it yet because you're trying to fit yourself into a known parameter. Well, I can't quit my job or start my own business. That's not okay. I'm not going to have that same security. Or, my husband or my wife will judge me, or, my society will think I'm crazy. We can have all these fears of stepping outside of the box, or again, judging others for stepping outside of the box, which, usually those who are judging are just kind of a few steps away from their own liberation, from kind of realizing that they're in a box too. Usually the things that we're very moralistic and no, never about are the very things that we haven't actually come to terms with in ourselves. This is freedom from the conditioning of our reality. and the recognition that there are many ways to be a human being. There are ways to think and ways to structure our life and be responsible, be a part of society that is not defined by the known parameters. And that might look very different, but embrace it. Because what the world really needs right now is more people trusting in their own individuality, not trying to fit into a group, not trying to fit into a box, but being who you are, trusting your own nature. I think that gives permission to a lot of people. There are careers, there are jobs, there are political movements, there are ways of being involved in society and volunteerisms that currently don't exist because someone hasn't thought of it yet. In the same way that there are social platforms and there are organizations and there are apps that will be invented as we start to realize and think about this life from a new angle. Oftentimes Aquarius in the 10th just needs to sort of step far back enough to realize, oh yeah, we've been operating on this level, doing this and this and this and this and this. But what if we step back and we realize all of what we've done has been on the premise or the assumption of a particular structural reality. But what if we question that structural reality? We can rewrite the political system. We can rewrite our daily schedule or what it means to have a job, all of those things. So there can be a lot of depression or suppression arising, which might be the invitation to explore where this liberation is being called for. Pluto in Aquarius in the 11th house. This emphasizes the very relationship to communities, to friends, to groups of people. So many of the things that I've been speaking to here are doubly emphasized in this archetype. So again, we all have different circles, right? If I think of myself, there are, so many different circles that I'm a part of. I'm not defined by any of them, but I resonate and belong in all of them, not as an absolute quality, like because I fit into all that they are, but because I am me. And everyone, as their nature, fits into wherever we are. So I'm a part of a synagogue. I'm connected to a couple different churches. I am teaching astrology classes. I am, let me think of all of them. I have a family. I'm a part of different song groups and song circle communities. I'm sure I can think of so many. All of them reflect different qualities of my individual nature. And maybe parts of me get to express in each of those. And that's fine. That's sort of normal, right? My partner, Michelle, just had a baby shower today. We're expecting pretty soon. I mean, it could really any day now at this point. And what was really beautiful about this baby shower, in my opinion, was it was at our friend Shiloh's place, and she is an intentional artist and a mentor and just a beautiful soul who does a lot of work around intentional creativity. And then we had people that are evangelical Christian that came, that are probably not going to watch this astrology video. Different people from different religions. It was one of the more stark gatherings of people where I saw people gathering around Michelle and our coming baby, where there's we're all friends, right? And they all wanted to be there for Michelle, but we're all very different, right? And there's something really beautiful about that. Just the ability for people to come together and recognize, it's like that painting where you see like a Sikh and a Jew, like a rabbi and a priest, like they're all around a bonfire and someone's playing guitar. This idea that communities and ecosystems actually want a lot of this kind of diversity. Like we don't have to conform to be like each other in every single regard. We just need to be ourselves. And when we're just ourselves, it doesn't matter what are the unique things that make us different. And these things change. Like you might change your ideologies or your views, but vibrationally as a soul, we are all fundamentally unique. And if you can look beyond the black, white, Jew, Christian, evangelical, right, conservative, left, like get beyond all of that and just kind of connect it, like, oh cool, you're an interesting one. Like your vibration is really cool. Like, and you can kind of close your eyes and feel people's vibrations. I can feel, and the color, the energy, every vibration is like its own work of art, its own song, its own dance. And let's just be there more. And I think it gets really difficult or traumatic or confusing when we're like, well, I'm afraid of not being a part of that. So we can find ourselves forming intense bonds with groups of people for the sake of, I don't want to separate. I don't want to liberate from that. but then they might be sharing, things or doing things that you don't resonate with, but you'll just go along with it anyway. Or you'll rebel from it. And the issue with rebellion is we give our power away to that which we're rebelling from in most cases, right? I'm not going to be, you guys are trying to suppress me and break me, so I'm not going to have anything to do with you anymore. I'm leaving this Facebook group or this astrology class or this religious group, whatever it is, there is this sense of I can't be myself here. And really that's just more trauma. And we give our power away because we believe that it could have possibly suppressed us to begin with. It could never have suppressed us. We're always free to be ourselves. And that might mean I'm going to go this way because each group has its own purpose, and it may not work with, coming back to my story of being at Yeshiva University, which for whatever reason is coming up a lot for me today. I was leading prayer groups at different colleges for Jews. But then I told one of the rabbinical leaders, hey, I don't know if I believe in God. I'm kind of questioning things, and I'm not really living like an honest life in terms of how I was before. I'm not really praying every day anymore. And there are things that I was just straying from. I wasn't able to really fit into that Orthodox community. What was hard for me about it was I loved it. There are parts of it, the prayer, the music, and there's a sort of spirituality that I always connected with, but I couldn't connect with the dogmas. So from an 11th house point of view, he said, well, I guess you shouldn't be doing these prayer groups anymore. And it was true. It was right. But it was sad for me because I loved doing it, but it just simply meant I couldn't fit into that anymore. And that's okay. There comes a point where an ecosystem changes as the species grow and develop, and we have to allow for that to occur as well. So if you find yourself finding new groups of people, new friends, it's all a developmental process. None of it defines you. It's just a part of you continuing to evolve into more and more of your own unique soul vibration. Pluto in Aquarius in the 12th house. You can say this is liberating from the dream. And we can get very attached to the dream symbols and the people and the communities and the groups and the us versus them and the impending Armageddon and the doomsday and all the things that we think are happening. We can actually martyr ourselves trying to do good, trying to help people that need help, or help the environment, or help the animals that are endangered. Like all these good causes, these humanitarian global causes can become very, very important. But we can also lose our soul in becoming so invested in it that we end up martyring ourselves and losing all of our energy and really kind of living in this place of stress where we can't do enough to heal and save the planet. Or we can't do enough to heal and save other people from their suffering, from their difficult conditions. We can't do enough to heal the communities that are being devastated from coal mine, or all the silvers and all the metals that we use for our phones, and all the people that are being affected economically in all the ways that are happening, all the people that are being killed and the children that are being, like all the horrible and difficult things that are happening in the world. They're real, but we can actually lose ourselves in feeling overwhelmed by the empathy and the desire to actually heal and make a change. And this is one of the deeper teachings of the signature. We can't move from a consciousness of illusion and separation to help and heal the illusion. We can't do enough to help other people get better if we ourselves are in the dark. So on one level, you can think of all of this life, in some sense, as being a tarot card, right? Like everything that's arising can be interpreted as a symbol for something on the internal level. And we can take it very literally, engage with the tarot card, engage with all the literal symbols, and get very confused or entangled, or really get to this point of, I can't do it. It's an ocean of power and energy that I can't seem to do enough to make any changes. But when we start to look within and recognize the whole world actually lives inside of us, it becomes a lot more about what is the vibration that I'm liberating and healing relative to what I'm perceiving out there, but is actually in here. It's kind of like seeing everything in life as sort of as if it's a dream. And you don't take those dream symbols too literally. You ask, what does this reflect on the inside? So there's an opportunity with Pluto and Aquarius in the 12th house to wake up. And that idea is going to be expressed on multiple levels of consciousness in ways that we can all apprehend. But in all cases, fundamentally points back to the perceiver and less to what we are perceiving. We can get really stuck in these projections of, visions of the future psychic impressions, and they're not necessarily true. These can be archetypal dynamics that are in the field that are being healed. And when we focus too much on the specifics, interestingly enough, we end up kind of crystallizing those traumatic vibrations. We don't actually heal them. I had a dream once where I lost some possessions, and I woke up from that dream feeling shaken. Like the energy of like something bad was going to happen. It was a very powerful and difficult dream experience. I went back to sleep, and later that night I had a dream where one of my teachers said to me, "Where do you believe in the possibility of loss?" That was powerful for me, deeply powerful, because it pointed me back to this vibrational reality of loss that I was feeling was actually pointing to an existing vibration in me. It wasn't about something's going to happen, but it's pointing to what's actually here now. When we project that, and events do occur, but they're all pointing to and ultimately here to liberate and free us up from the matrix within which we are sleeping. So let's speak to another dimension of this. We can have Aquarius in the 12th, this sort of utopian ideal where we all get along and all people, everyone, like every single archetype and every single person, human condition and disability and race and culture and gender and political, like we all get together and we have a meal at a table. And those that don't sit at tables, there's a spot on the floor for them. Like everyone's included. And we can be very kind and giving, but in a very naive way, where we are delusionally projecting this idea of unity in a way that isn't actually accurate to where people actually are. Unity is the truth. But then we can create expectations that people will be kind and giving and inclusive, and will be duped, will be taken advantage of, we'll include everyone, but then we're not going to be picked to be a part of the baseball game, right? So being realistic about things, but also loving at the same time. That's one of the confusing points here. I've given up on humanity. We can have these subconscious memories of being a part of different minority groups or subdivisions of society or monastic groups that were persecuted. And so there can be a feeling of, I've given up on society. The small and the weak are always going to get hurt. I feel vulnerable. I'm going to hide. I keep on giving, but then I keep on getting hurt and disappointed. There's a dissolving of naivety here. And the recognition that the truth of our unity and our togetherness is not based upon a physical expressed reality of it, where people are behaving in particular ideas. Again, with Aquarius, we got to liberate from the metaphor, from these ideas of this is what liberation looks like. We recognize that unity is just the truth, but when we give it a condition, we're no longer in the unconditioned place of truth. We're projecting a very particular naive idea. We actually allow our dreams and our greater possibilities for humanity to emerge by not trying to naively expect or hope that it's just all going to work out. We learn to live and vibrate that unconditional acceptance and inclusion, but without being naive. The key is a sort of detachment and neutralness that allows the world to be as it is. Oh yes, there's suffering. Bad people do bad things. Good people get hurt. That is all a part of it. And I can't, again, martyr myself or do enough to fix it and make it all better so that we're all holding hands. It's not going to work. So we liberate ourselves from all those illusions and we allow everything to be as it is. We can actually begin to receive and get the guidance for the roles that we can play. The magic and the beauty of Aquarius in the 12th, the more soul-centered we are, Pluto, the more concentrated we are on our undying eternal essence, the more we'll find ourselves being guided and directed to be an instrument of whatever serves the collective healing that actually brings about our dreams and our visions, but by way of kind of letting go of control and surrendering to a greater guidance that is at the core of all of our lives. All right, everyone. This completes my take on Pluto in Aquarius through the 12 houses from the lens of our liberation, our deconditioning, liberation from the known process. Thank you so much for watching.